Uh-oh. What have we got going here?
We're fixing the planter. We're getting ready for the no-till spring here. It's our first one, the second one.
This just looked like a bad sign to me when the pedibone is under the planter.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell everyone in the YouTube universe how you're feeling?
I'm feeling pretty damn good right now.
Dad got the word from his doctor today that his feet are in good shape, so he's going to be out here with me now more.
Baby, I'm back.
So we're fixing, and we are going to get these axles. We're going to get the new bearings in on the ground wheels here. The drive wheels. And then we've got to put some spiked closing wheels on the back. And we've got some other things to do. I'll kind of show as we go along and do it. That's good.
The good old bone did her again.
One down, one to go. I'd say it's worn out. So a quick recap on our current project. We got new wheel bearings on the ground drive wheels for the planter so far. You might see here that we put on a new depth gauge wheel. That was kind of a bear to get that off and get it switched out, but we managed it. Now we need to do spiked closing wheels, one spiked closing wheel on each row unit. And then on the planting coulters, sandwiched in between here is a seed tube guard on each of these. We need 3 more of those. And then, hard to see here as well, better when we get the pieces apart, but there's a mud scraper that mounts on there. We did some new ones last year. We need to finish those up. And then the last thing, inside this big box beam is a small hydraulic cylinder that controls the marker arms and how they go up and down. That has got a bad seal and is leaking hydraulic fluid pretty badly, so we need to fix that as well. And that will pretty much finish our conversion here of this planter from a standard planter to a no-till planter. A lot of different opinions on how much stuff you need to add and what type of things you need to add to a planter for no-till. We're just basing all this off of our experience last year. We did the minimal amount that we needed to. We put down pressure springs on it. You can see they're just standard down pressure springs. And gave it a try last year and then made a note of what we thought was working well and what wasn't. So everything we're doing here is just based off of that experience. And then we'll try it again this year and we'll make further modifications if necessary. Just an update as we go along. We're replacing these seed tube guards. That's a new one, bright and shiny. And then the planting coulter goes back on. And we'll have a new mud scraper that'll go here. And that's what we're working on right now. I don't know, do you think we could have gotten another year out of it?
No.
All right, we've wrapped up with the most basic repairs here. We've got all new seed tube guards, all new mud scrapers, one new depth gauge wheel, because it was shot. We've got a couple other depth gauge wheels that could stand to be replaced, but we're gonna try to get by without doing it this year. And then probably the most obvious upgrade now is the Copperhead closing wheels. One spiked closing wheel on each row unit. This was our biggest issue last year, was getting the seed trench closed with the smooth closing wheels. So I have heard, rumor has it, that you can put one spiked closing wheel on and it'll do the job just fine for our region and our soils. I guess time will tell and we'll see how this all goes. So now, what we have to do yet on this machine is we have to pull out the marker arm cylinder, which is leaking pretty badly. We're losing a lot of hydraulic fluid when we run the planter, so we have to take that out and see if we can put a new seal kit in it, and then we should be just about done at that point. Hey, you guys want to see something really funny? Duke hates the marker arm. That thing is a major threat. At this point, I need to give a big shout out to farmer and YouTuber C.E. Smith, because if it weren't for his demonstration video, I would have never figured out how to get apart the single action hydraulic cylinder that controls the marker arms on the corn planter. That was just incredible. I was looking around on the internet for some kind of a guide or even just a diagram showing how it went together. And here he's got videos that show exactly how to do it, so thanks to him, it was a 5-minute process. We already had the cylinder out and we took it apart and got that central cylinder rod out of there so we can put the new seal in. So thank you for that. That was really great. It's the next day, and just a quick recap, this is the assembly that contains the little hydraulic cylinder that controls the marker arms on the planter. We pulled all that out of there, and thanks to that video I was telling you about, we were able to figure out how to get that cylinder apart, and Dad went to John Deere to order seals for it. And the seals are back ordered. Well, I should say they're operating with a skeleton staff, so it's going to take a couple of days before the seals come in. So we're going to switch gears here and work on a different piece of equipment. This is our Truax no-till drill. This is what we use to plant our soybeans, and what I'm hoping we can use increasingly to plant cover crops, and if we do any no-till small grains in the future, this will be the tool for it. We got it for a very, very reasonable price, and as you might imagine, that comes with the caveat that it needed quite a bit of work. So we purchased this right before we planted soybeans last year, and we did the best we could to make it work, and it got the job done, although I wouldn't say it did it well. So now this year we're going through and trying to correct as many different issues on it as we can. So I'll kind of take you through that with me as I'm tuning this up. Now, in past videos, I've spent a lot of time kind of going detail by detail as I did repair work on stuff, and because I kind of wanted the focus of this channel to be more on the regenerative agriculture practices and how we manage the farm, more or less, I'm not going to go quite as in-depth with the repair stuff. Plus, I usually have greasy hands, and it's hard to manage a phone or a camera or whatever when you got that going on. So I'll kind of do a little something, tell you what I've done, come back to it, but it's not going to be in-depth repair guides. We'll try to keep it to the farm work stuff. So just know that we've got to tune up this drill, and I'll tell you what we're doing, but I'm not going to have the camera pointed at my hands as I'm working on things. Now that said, this is kind of a neat machine. It's only 8 feet wide, and that's all the bigger we really need it to be. A bigger drill would have been nice, but any of our tractors can handle this pretty easily on our ground. We don't have a lot of hills, so even though a no-till drill is harder to pull, this will manage just fine on our small hills. It's got 3 different seed boxes, a small seed box, a fluffy seed box, which we probably won't use. That's more for conservation type work, and prairie seeds, prairie grasses, and species that I'm not very familiar with. And then in the back is the large seed box, which we use for soybeans. The fluffy seed box is currently disabled. It's got a little issue in its transmission gear selector system that I haven't addressed, and probably am not going to, because we won't use it very often. It's got no-till coulters on the front. There's a coulter cart incorporated into it. Now these coulters didn't do a very good job last year of cutting through the corn residue and making a trench for the planting coulters to follow behind. And part of that is because they are extremely dull. We were thinking about replacing them, and actually we were looking at the no-till coulter setups on something more like a Great Plains drill or a John Deere, where these coulters are both tilted and twisted a little bit, so that they're doing more of a scraping action, more like a disc. And a lot of no-till drills have just fluted coulters, but they run in a straight line to break the soil. Maybe they'll have a wavy coulter, but it's not tilted and twisted on 2 axes like these are. So we thought about converting it over, and that would be pretty expensive to do. Our other option would be to take these off and try to take the twist out of them, which is still something we're considering doing. But for right now, what I'm thinking about doing is just taking these discs off and sharpening them, which is what I've done with this one. This didn't take me very long to do, but you can see on the back side there, I just put that on a grinder wheel and tuned it up. Took maybe 20 minutes, polished up the front side, and got it good and sharp. It's not, you know, shaving sharp or anything. It doesn't need to be. It's going to wear in the field. Put a pretty, you know, not a very large taper on there, because, you know, if you put a really long taper on it, it'll just wear down faster. So we want this to be able to cut through the residue. And I thought maybe just getting them sharp might make the difference that we need. So I have to do all of that. I gotta take those off and sharpen them up and see if that'll work. We'll probably take it in the field and do a test run with it with no seed in it, just to see how it carves through. And then some of these brackets are bent. That's really in bad shape. I've got some replacements for a few of those. This one has been welded a few times, and I ended up burying this thing in the mud, and when I raised it up out of the mud last year, it kinked it. So we'll replace a few of those. Some of those down pressure rods are in kind of bad shape. I've replaced 1 or 2 of them already, and I'll do some more. In the back, there's 2 sets of seed tubes. Those bigger ones are for the fluffy seed and the small seed, and then like for the soybeans and the large seed, there's a second set of tubes. And they have their own kind of galvanized seed tube here. A few of those, you can see I got zip ties on that one and that one back there. We're gonna need to fix a few of those. These press wheels, I'm not a huge fan of. I haven't quite figured out how to change the system on them yet though. They do work. I think they'll work better once we have the coulter cart up front working a little bit better. See, some of these springs are bad too. That one's all crunched and compressed, so I've got a few replacements for those. So we just have to go through and make some minor tune-ups. The other thing is, every one of these coulters, the planting coulters here, have depth bands on them, and those are mud scrapers. And every one of those is worn out. I mean, completely worn out. So I went and bought an entire new set of mud scrapers, and that was our biggest issue last year, was we were trying to plant in wet conditions, and the mud would build up on those planting coulters, and then they wouldn't go in the ground. And so, I mean, just the simplest thing, just having mud scrapers that are tuned up can make a gigantic difference. So we'll swap all of those out and get them set with the right pressure. A couple of these closing wheels or packer wheels in the back are pretty worn out. We're going to need to get some new ones for that, I think. And finally, there are a couple of planting coulters with bad bearings. So those I'm going to have to take up to New Hope, Minnesota, where this drill was made, and get those replaced. I guess they press in new bearings right at the factory. So hopefully all of that won't run us too much money. I've got some parts already ready to go, so that's what I'm doing today, is getting a few things that I have installed, and we'll try to get this thing all tuned up. And then I'm really hoping that sometimes, even though none of those jobs are overly large jobs on their own, hopefully when you add all those things together, the effect is pronounced, you know, where we'll go in the field and this thing will work a lot better. If I can just get those beans in the ground and get a little bit of dirt packed over them, that would be great. My biggest issue with the drill last year was just simply that that front coulter cart didn't cut through the corn stalks. It didn't clear a path for the planting coulters. And since the planting coulters didn't have good mud scrapers on them, they didn't go in the ground very well. And we ended up with a lot of beans that were just left on the soil surface. Not ideal. I mean, beans can tolerate a shallow planting depth. You want them like an inch in the ground. A half inch is fine, they'll germinate. But it just really was inconsistent. And so we ended up taking an old drag section and dragging the cornfields. And if anything, we just dragged corn stalks over the top of a lot of the beans. And so we did do all right for germination. We also didn't have the drill calibrated right. We got our seeding rate wrong. So it's just a classic case of take all those little things, fix them all, and add all that up. And hopefully this year we'll have a much better success rate with it. Oh yeah, and for those of you who are curious, this specifically is a Truax Model 812. 8 feet wide, 12 coulters. I'm assuming that's how they get the number. This was manufactured in 1987, and it was sold to the Wisconsin DNR. And when we bought it, it had Minnesota DNR plates on it. So I think it was used for conservation planting and road ditches and stuff, probably by both states for a long, long time. So it's got some history to it, and I think it's kind of neat. The company that manufactured this is still based out of the same place where it was started. The guy who started the company is still in charge of it. They were kind of an early no-till drill producer, and I think a lot of other companies adopted some of their ideas. So even though I think probably John Deere and Great Plains and stuff are making drills that are maybe a little more agriculturally suited nowadays, it's kind of cool that this is an early example of a no-till drill design. So if we can get it working right and good enough for us, it should do a nice job. All right, so I lied a little bit. We are doing tillage in one spot. This is our potato patch. I haven't quite figured out how to do no-till potatoes yet. I don't think that's really a thing at this point. Although I have heard of some people just planting them in straw, putting them on the ground and putting straw over them. We're not quite that hardcore, so we did bust out the plow and plowed up a spot to plant some potatoes for our own consumption. And now Dad is disking that over to break up the clumps. Oh, that was a rock. There we go. That's about the only place on our farm you're going to see tillage right now. Well, I'm about wrapped up here for the day. I got a whole pile of no-till coulters from the front of the drill that I took off. That's 5 ready to be sharpened, plus the one I already did. And I've got a whole pile of planting coulters back here that are pretty well serviced and tuned up. I replaced a few press wheel springs. You can see a new one there. A lot of these seed tubes were loose. They have a connecting bolt. It's hidden behind the coulters, but it's down in there. So to fix that, I had to take a coulter off and get a new bolt in there, because some of these were flopping around and I had zip ties on them. Now the ones I fixed won't have zip ties anymore. All new mud scrapers. I've got the other 6 left to go. And a few of these coulters have bad bearings, and I think I'm just going to get a whole new set of coulters instead of having new bearings pressed in, because they're all pretty well worn. So I think we'll look at a complete replacement of all the planting coulters for next year, but we'll do the best we can to get through this year with what we've got and tune up all this other stuff. Only so much you can do. Good boy. And just like that, we're back to winter. We had ourselves a nice Easter snowstorm here. Got about 8 inches of snow here at the farm. It's all melting pretty quickly though, but it's kind of a cold, nasty, windy day, so I'm gonna sharpen some no-till coulters. Try to make myself useful that way. So it turns out it's really hard to hold the camera and grind a coulter one-handed. So, you know, take that part with a grain of salt. Here we go. 6 coulters done, and that leaves 6 to go. You can see the beveled edge there that I put on there. Those are pretty sharp. It takes about 20 minutes per coulter to sharpen them up with the bench grinder, which is not an insignificant amount of time. But when you consider the cost of a new coulter, which is, I'm not exactly sure, but I think they're over $30, probably worthwhile to sharpen them up for this year for the small amount of soybean acres that we're gonna do. Well, here we are again. I've been at this on and off in the evening hours, and anytime that I'm not playing kindergarten teacher and COVID-19 dad. So I've got all these planting units now fixed up the way I want them. And then around front, on the no-till coulter cart, these I have to remove now, sharpen them up. I think I'm going to do that while I have all these planting coulters out, because I can get in here and work a little bit more easily and stand in here where I can get at those bolts to get them loose. So we're getting close on this. We've just got the corn planter hooked up to the M, and we did a bunch of swapping of parts, which I already told you about. We had to do a little bit of switching around on the back side here with these spiked closing wheels. We had one closing wheel assembly here that wasn't aligning quite right with the planting discs, so we kind of shuffled things around and tried to get that mechanically positioned where it's supposed to be. It's kind of worn out, so we had to fiddle with it quite a bit. With the marker arms, there's a hydraulic cylinder inside this big beam tube that was leaking, and we took that out and put a new seal in there, and that was successful. We don't have any leaks and had to tinker around with the switching mechanism. There's a mechanical actuator that switches which arm goes up and down that needed a little bit of TLC. So now I think we're gonna be ready to go. So we're gonna take this out in the field and make sure everything's aligned properly and run it down the field a little bit without any seed in it, just to see if everything is getting in the ground the way it's supposed to and how it's gonna close up the seed trench, and just basically do a test run. So
we're going to do a very important thing. We're going to mark the rows for the potato patch.
So while Dad gets that turned around and comes through here, I'll just specify we're going to take this into a field of soybean stubble so that we're pretty much replicating the exact conditions that we'll be experiencing during planting time. That way, as we check the planter and make sure that it's all going to work properly, it's an accurate assessment and it's not using a concrete floor or something that isn't appropriate. We're going to use real world conditions to make sure we're getting this set right. Ready? What we're looking at is, are the seed disc openers making a good trench in the soil? It looks like they are. And then we can see it's not really perfectly aligned, but before I had a smooth wheel on this side and it was running right over the seed trench, which is not going to close anything up. So by shifting a few things around, and this unit got damaged somehow, but it's not obvious. It must be twisted or something, but it's hard to tell. So by realigning the wheels and switching the closing wheel to the other side, I could add some shims and move this spiked closing wheel in and out. Now we're getting where it's obviously crumbling up the seed trench nicely, and it's really, you can see that we're stitching that seed trench closed. It's crumbling it in nicely. Here in some heavier residue, it's really done a good job closing it up too. Same situation here. That looks really good. That one could use a little adjustment yet, but otherwise it looks pretty good. So there we go. I think these Copperhead closing wheels are going to be really a good deal for us. They seem to do a much better job than the two smooth closing wheels, so I think we made a good choice on that. Now that he's lifted the planter up out of the ground, we can see here's the seed slot, and then here's where the closing wheels were, and that's got that crumbled in really nicely. So I think we got a winning combination here. This should give us a much better planting result than we had last year. So it's April 18th, which means that it's too early for actually planting any corn. But putting the planter in the ground and watching it do a nice job kind of makes a person want to put seed in the boxes and go, doesn't it?
Yes, especially on a 60-degree day. It's beautiful. Yep.
So hopefully things hold out, and now we've got it all coordinated and calibrated and fixed up and doing what it's supposed to do.
We're ready to go.
When it's actually time to plant, we can just go. So again, this is just using the empty planter to mark out the rows for our potatoes. Life is good. Oh, to be a dog, just hanging out on a farm. So now that's the result. We've got some 38-inch row spacing to plant potatoes. That leaves us room in between for mulch and to pull up some dirt to hill them once they get bigger. This is just something we do for us to enjoy fresh potatoes. If you got the land, you might as well grow something you can eat. We're taking a little break here from the unending process of equipment repair. And since it's such a nice day, we decided we'll try to get the potatoes in the ground. So Dad's cutting them up there to economize the leftovers from last year. We do buy new seed stock every couple of years, but you can use the leftovers. By my understanding, you can use them for about 2 years and still have them be viable. So these are leftover potatoes that were in, well, these were in my house. You can tell they were a lot warmer. These were from the root cellar. The bucket that Dad's got over there is from the root cellar. We've got a couple of varieties. Not exactly sure now. I can't remember. One is a red potato and one is like a russet or something. It doesn't really matter. They taste good. I gotta say, this potato is the most metal thing I've seen today. Here we go. The potato patch is all done, all planted. Watered in. Now I think at some point we'll mulch it over with maybe some meadow grass or something, but for now, that'll do it. That'll keep them until they start to sprout. Today's been a good day. We got the planter tuned up completely and ready to go. It's certified now. It's off the books. We can say that's ready. And got the potato patch all planted. That's a big achievement. The past 2 years we've been scrambling to try to get that done at the last minute and much too late. So we're actually on time this year with planting potatoes. A nice feeling to have that done. And I am just about done sharpening coulters for the no-till drill. So with any luck tomorrow, we'll get that all put back together, and that will be it for prep work for planting. We have to get the seed here and figure out our fertilizer plan. We're going to do some soil tests. So we've got a few steps yet beyond just the equipment fixing and tuning up. But we're getting really close, and it'll be nice to be ahead of the game this year. It seems like we're, maybe for the first time in a long time, kind of on top of stuff.